Hey, it's day two. Yeah, I'm reading my book, kind of goofy, but I'm actually going to reference something today in the book that I wrote a couple years ago. If you didn't know I wrote a book, just to tell you a little bit about it, it's co-authored with one of my dearest friends, Yasmin Karachiwala, who is an amazing Pilates instructor and personal trainer out of Mumbai, India. And we wrote a book on Pilates and posture. So I'm going to reference it a little bit today when we talk about leg stretches, because there's a couple muscle things in here that I want to show you guys and talk to you about. So anyway, welcome back to day two to our Desk Warrior Boot Camp. If you are here and watching this, just shoot me a quick emoji about maybe something that's how you're feeling today. And something happy or sad or frustrated or whatever. Just throw an emoji in there so I know that you are watching. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them in there too. If I have time at the end, I will make sure that I address them. So today, oh, and one more reminder to make sure you share the love. So if you are enjoying these videos and learning something in this course, feel free to invite them to our group and or share the email, pass it on, because that's how we can all get healthier sitting at our desks. All right, so today we are going to talk about leg stretches, but before we get there, I want to talk about the pelvis. Super important. We talked about it yesterday a little bit. We talked about a neutral pelvis versus a posterior pelvic tilt pelvis, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more again today. So let's talk about the different deviations that people tend to have in their lower body posture and how that affects what leg stretches you should focus on, okay? So we talked yesterday about the posterior pelvic tilt posture, and so I'm gonna stand so you can see if someone has a posterior pelvic tilt, they usually have like no butt muscles and they have like no curvature here in the lumbar spine, and they often have back pain, and they often have rounded shoulders. And then we have the other opposite pelvic position, which is the anterior pelvic tilt, where we have excessive curvature in the spine. We usually have our bellies hanging out here. Oftentimes it comes with kyphosis as well, and oftentimes it comes with back pain. So in the posterior pelvic tilt position, I'm going to reference page 42 in Sculpt and Shape the Pilates Way, and I'll show that picture. That's the posterior pelvic tilt. We talk about the different muscle groups that are tight. So in this position, we have a tight hamstring muscles. So hamstrings are the muscles that are back here behind your legs. And when they're tight, if you think about it, it kind of pulls that pelvis under because they're shortened. The other muscle group that is tight with the posterior pelvic tilt posture is going to be your abdominal muscles. So again, if they're tightened, it kind of pulls that pelvis underneath you. This posture also comes with weak gluteal muscles, so weak butt muscles, because they're just not there. It's hard to access them because that pelvis is sort of tucked under, so you can't access those muscles. And then we have the weak hip flexors. The hip flexors are the muscles right here in the front of your hip. They're responsible for flexing the hip. And again, because we're in that position, the hip flexors aren't activated properly. So if I was working with a client with an extreme posterior pelvic tilt, I would be giving them an exercise to activate the hip flexors. We won't be working on exercises so much today. We'll be working mainly on stretches, but I'll talk later in the week about how you can learn about exercises that you can do for this particular posture. Now moving to the anterior tilt, and just to show you the picture again here, that's when you have an excessive curvature in the lumbar spine, and where the boot, I call it kind of booty in the wind posture. And so the muscles that are tight here are our hip flexors, so we were just talking about that. These get very, very tight because when they're shortened, it pulls that pelvis backwards. Let me do that again. So when these muscles are shortened, it pulls the pelvis backwards. We have tight erector spinae muscles, which are the muscles here in the back along the spine. And when they're tightened, again, it kind of shortens and compresses everything. There's a tight latissimus dorsi muscle, which is that side muscle along your back. Again, when it's tight, it can pull that pelvis into that position. We have weak abdominals, okay? So again, if you're kind of arching, your belly's sort of hanging out, not a lot of core engagement. We talked yesterday about what to do to activate that deep inner core. So make sure that you have to strengthen your abdominals if you've got an anterior pelvic tilt. And then again, weak gluteus medius, weak gluteus maximus. Those are just across the board when I'm working with people. We always work on core work, and then we always work on glute work. I've discovered more and more as I've done this work for years now that strengthening the glutes is never a bad thing. Oftentimes people need more gluteus medius strengthening or gluteus maximus. That depends on the person. But in general, if we work the whole glute complex, we usually get the body stronger and can often get the people out of pain, specifically lower back pain. So there you go. So you've got for tightness, and now we're dealing with stretches. I'm going to move into the leg stretch series now. Because I don't know what posture you have, I'm going to go ahead and stretch the hamstrings and the hip flexors. We're also going to do a quick stretch for the inner thighs, the adductors, which tend to get tight when we're sitting a lot. We're going to do a glute stretch because it just feels good, and it's important to open up the hips from sitting all day long. We're going to do a calf stretch, and if we have time, we'll do a quad stretch. So let's get started. I want you guys to join me with this. I'm assuming you're sitting at your desk, wherever you are. So with the hip flexor stretch, I'm going to move backward. And I'm going to move this camera down, which means you might lose vision of my face. And that is okay. All right, let's get this, sorry, out of the way. And I'm going to move to the side of my chair. Now, if you have a chair that has arms, then this is a little bit more challenging. But as you can see, I'm going to take one leg behind me. I'm going to try to keep my hips forward towards the camera. And then I'm going to turn to the side so you can see. But I'm really tucking my pelvis under here. And I'm loaded on the back of my foot. So let me turn to the side. All right, let me get you down a little bit lower so you guys can see my feet. There we go. All right, so I'm up on my foot. This knee is directly underneath this hip, and I'm tucking my pelvis underneath me. So I'm actually moving into a posterior pelvic tilt here. That way I stretch this muscle here in the front of the hip. So we're gonna hold this for about a minute. Hopefully you guys are in this position. As you can see, you can still place your hands in front of you and be typing in this position. So if I was here, I'd be stretching my hip flexors and typing on my computer at the same time. Literally doesn't take too much away from my desk experience. Let's turn to the other side. So if you're doing this with me, that was probably about a minute. We'll take the other side. I'd like you guys to do these stretches for about a minute each when you're doing them, a couple times a day. Again, here you can see I'm tucking my pelvis underneath me. I'm up on the ball of my foot behind me. In this case, my knee's a little behind me. You can take it behind you a little bit as long as it's not arching your back, okay? So that's going to depend on the person. Oftentimes for clients, I need to have the knee forward so that they're not arching that back and that they get that tilt under. And again, the goal here is to feel the stretch right here in these muscles that run across the hips. And a lot of people have tight hip flexors. Tight hip flexors are something that's really common. And again, it can contribute to lower back pain, hip pain, all sorts of crazy stuff. So hopefully you've done 1 minute on one side there with the hip flexor stretch. And now we're going to move on to the hamstrings. With hamstrings, I have two ways that we can do this. One that's really kind of easy and nobody will notice that you're doing this stretch. Not no one, but you know, it doesn't look so obvious. And the second one, yeah, everyone's going to know you're doing a hamstring stretch. But if you're in a private space, an office space, it doesn't matter. So the first one is really for if you're more in a public space. So for this, you're going to scoot to the front of your chair. You're going to take one leg out in front of you, and you're going to flex your foot. So I'll turn to the side here so you can see my foot is flexed. Again, scooting to the front of my chair. I'm going to sit up nice and tall, and I'm going to bend over with a flat back. Again, I can place my hands here on a keyboard, and I can see, you can see that I can continue to type, although it might be more comfortable just to do the stretch like this. Now, rounding your back, I see this all the time. It's okay, you're gonna get a hamstring stretch. But I have found that if we go from the hip hinge, and you lean from the hips, and you maintain that back position in a neutral position, you're going to get a more effective stretch in the hamstrings, and it's gonna have a better effect for you. Let's go to the other side. I'm assuming you did that for about a minute. So again, scooting to the front of your chair, bringing one foot out in front of you, and then finding that flat back lean. So we stick that chest out, we lean forward. If you want to grab for the toe or the knee or whatever, you can do that. Again, you know, like I said, this is not terrible. It's just not going to be as effective as this flat back position here. I call this a flat back position. It's not really flat because you do have that curvature. but it's not rounded, that's for sure. Or we can call this a hip hinge. Learning how to hip hinge properly is a very important concept in proper movement. One of the major things I have to end up teaching people who have a lot of pain. Oftentimes they don't know how to hip hinge properly and they're using their back too much. That's a lecture for another day. But in the meantime, I just wanted you guys to finish your minute of hamstring stretching here on this other side. Okay, for the second one, that's a little bit more, or a little bit less obvious, or more obvious and less subtle. I'm gonna adjust my camera over here, and I'm going to take my hands, it's not enough over my picture frame, on the edge of this, and I want to come down here into what I call a wall hamstring stretch. Normally I'd have my hands on a wall. Here it's a desk hamstring stretch. Now, if you watch, again, I don't want to be in this rounded position. I want to be in this flat back position. Oftentimes people need to take a slight knee bend to get this position proper. I have pretty flexible use in this kind of exercise because I can bend over and keep my legs straight and find my flat back. So I'm going to soften my knees for you, and I'm going to think about really flipping my tailbone backwards and arching my lower back. Technically, you're not going to go into too much of an arch here, but that's the sensation you want to try to have. And you will feel that stretch all the way down the back of your leg. So here we are. I'm in this position. I'm going to soften my knees. I'm going to flip my tailbone backward. And then I'm going to straighten my legs a little just because that's how I'm going to feel the hamstring stretch. This is super yummy. The longer you can hold this, the better it is for your body. A minute minimum, 2 to 3 minutes, feels amazing as well. You also get an added bonus of an upper body stretch when you do this exercise at the same time. Sorry for the glare. I'm realizing it's in the evening here today, so the sun is coming through those windows, which is normally a nice thing. Okay, moving on. We did the hip flexors and hamstrings. As I mentioned, 2 of the most important muscles. Now we're going to work on the glutes. We love stretching the glutes. This is super easy to do at your desk. So I'm going to take one leg, I'm sure you've seen this, across the other leg here. The key here is to try to find that external rotation in that hip joint. So I'm going to place this hand here on this knee. I want to make sure both of my butt cheeks are planted firmly into the chair. I'm going to sit up nice and tall, and then I'm going to, again, lean over with that flat back. So let me show you from the side so you can see. I got this knee as open as you can. If you're up here because you're tight, that's perfectly fine. Don't wrench it open. Do what you need to do. And then again, you're going to lean over with that flat back. Again, this is okay, but this is going to get you a more effective stretch. Nice flat back lean there. Again, pushing that knee open. Hopefully that's been about a minute for you, so let's switch to the other side. So cross that ankle over. Now, something else to note here. If you're super tight and this knee is up here, then you can walk this foot forward. You can see my knee kind of goes down a little bit. Then it gets a little bit easier. It's not as intense for you. If you bring the foot in, see how my knee went up there? That's more intensity. So there's a little finesse that you can do in the exercise. You can straighten the leg for less intensity. You can bend the knee for more intensity. And again, you want to sit up tall, lift your chest, and then lean over so you can get that stretch here in that glute. We'll hang out here for about another 15 more seconds is my guess. Again, try to do 1 minute every time you do it. And yeah, as I said, you can type on your computer as you're doing this at the same time. This one should not take any interruption in your day. And there's literally no reason why you can't do this a couple times a day. Remember, you have to scoot to the front of your chair in order to make this happen. If you're on a chair with rollers, just be careful when doing any of this work. So you have to, talk about that. On Thursday, I have decided that I'm going to add a little extra time, 5 minutes, into our plan to discuss some posture products, posture chairs, that kind of thing. So if you have questions about that, Thursday will be the day that we'll be addressing that. Okay, adductor stretch. Your adductors are your muscles here in your inner thighs. They tend to get tight when, again, we're sitting in that hip flex position all day long. So this next one, this one's a little challenging if you have a chair that has arms, okay? So you might have to find a chair that doesn't have arms to do this. And let me angle this down so you can see my foot position here. I'm going to take my foot out to the side, and I'm going to have that foot facing forward as much as I can. And then I'm going to, again, scoot to the front of the chair. And then I'm not going to lean forward on this. I'm going to just hold this. This should feel a mild stretch here or a major stretch, depending on how tight you are, in this inner thigh area here. Again, super easy. Just got to scoot to the front of your chair, take the leg out to the side, point the toe forward. Oftentimes, if I scoot forward a little bit more, I'll get more intensity in the stretch. If I take the leg behind me a little bit more, I'll get more intensity in the stretch. And that's how you would intensify this one. Let's take the other side here so that you guys can walk out of this class today having done some leg stretches and hopefully feeling a little bit better. So a little personal story here. The reason why I got into this kind of work is when I was in my 20s, I had run my first and only marathon. And shortly after I did this, I had all sorts of crazy back pain. And I went to a chiropractor and I went to the doctor and they all told me to do stretches and exercises and they all thought they were crazy. I said, there's no way I could have this kind of pain and it be coming from something that can be resolved with stretches and exercises. I did not believe them. About a year or two later, I decided to go through my certification program and I learned a little bit more about alignment and how that works and how the pressure it puts on the joints. And then I started actually doing the work that I'm teaching you today physically for myself, and my back pain went away. So it's really powerful. It may, if you're currently in chronic pain, it may seem like this stuff can't help you, but a daily commitment to it can really make a difference. Can really make a difference. Activating the right muscles and elongating the right muscles can really make a difference. So there's my pep talk. I got 2 more stretches for you. All right, moving on to calves. So calves don't necessarily have a direct result on the position of your pelvis, but they do have a direct impact on how your knees function and then eventually how your hips function. And I see a lot of people who walk and stand in this turnout position here. And this is really dangerous. If you are not moving through your feet with a proper gait cycle, heel strike, roll through the foot onto the ball of the foot. If you're walking like a duck and your feet are turned out, that means the function of your glutes, the function of your hips, everything is disrupted. And when that becomes disrupted, we start compensating and we start using our back muscles and other muscles that we don't want to be using for walking down the street. So stretching the calves is sort of a critical piece. It's one of the first things I give my clients. So I'm going to show you, we can do it right here at our desk. I'll show you this way, and then I'll show you to the side. So here you can see I'm going to try to get both hips facing forward towards the camera here. Oh, my foot's turned out a little bit, so I'm going to adjust that. My back leg is straight, my front leg is bent, and then I'm going to place my hands on the imaginary keyboard in front of me here. I'm going to turn to the side so you can really see this now. Back up a little bit. This is standing, so you will have to get out of your chair for this. One leg behind, one leg forward, both hips forward, back leg straight. And as you can see, I'm getting a nice intense stretch there in the back of my calf. But again, pretty easy to just continue doing your work as is because you're in a nice deep lunge here. You should be able to continue working or talking on the phone or doing whatever you need to. Let's switch legs so you get that minute on each side. Again, both hips forward. It's really important to get that back foot aligned and keep it straight. The knee wants to bend here because it's tight. So I'm going to straighten that knee. My right leg is always, keep stretching. My right leg is always tighter than my left. That's how I'm made. So you will always see me cheating on my right side. I have to actively remind myself to straighten that leg or make sure the foot's not turned out or make sure the hip is not rotated. And everybody's going to have one side that's tighter than the other. Okay, I've got 1 more minute, so I'm going to quickly fly through a quadricep stretch. It's a standing stretch. It also stretches the hip flexors. It's also a muscle group that gets tight from sitting a lot. Most people, I'm sure you've seen this stretch. Most people do it incorrectly. Let me show you what I mean. All right, this chair is here, and I'm going to grab this toe behind me. Again, this is not something you can do and not have people notice. People are going to clearly notice you're doing this at your desk. That's okay. Here's where the mistake is. Most people let this knee slide forward. I would much rather you have your knee back in alignment so you can really get the stretch here in your hip flexor than how close your heel is to your butt. I don't care so much about that. In this position, you also want to tuck your pelvis a little bit. That will help increase the stretch here in the front of your hip flexor. So again, watch the knee doesn't come forward. Let's do the other side really quickly. I often teach this stretch on my tighter side. Whew. I often teach this stretch also lying down on the floor. When you do it that way, you are bound to not let the knee come forward because the floor is in your way. Now, sometimes people compensate and their butt goes backward, so we try to correct that. But again, tucking your pelvis under, keeping your knees aligned. I'm not worried about how much I'm yanking with my heel. That's less important than where the knee position is for the exercise. Okay, we slam through a hip flexor stretch, 2 different hamstring stretches, inner thigh stretch, glute stretch, calf stretch, and quad stretch. So 7 different stretches. That's a lot of content for you guys to take in and see if you can integrate into your day. If you have any questions, feel free to please post in the Facebook group, respond to this video so I know that you guys are watching, and I will see you tomorrow where we're going to talk about hunchback posture and things we can do for our upper body and for our neck in case you're in upper back pain or neck pain. I will see you tomorrow. Have a great evening.